Well, hello again everybody. I hope you are well. I thought it was about time I did another English video on an aviation English topic. And this particular video was inspired by an experience I had with a pilot who contacted me through my website, as many do, to ask for a little bit of advice, who had just failed an English test with a body. And I think they had a level 3, and I think their level 3 was maybe structure and comprehension, something like that. We had a little chat in English, and I, as I quite often do, advised them on things they could work on to maybe improve their level and pass the test the next time. And then 2 weeks later, the same person phones me and says, "Oh, I've gone to another body, body X, and I got a level 5. So somebody has managed to go from a level 3, so basically being considered non-operational, to a level 5, so the extended level, in the space of about 3 weeks. And this struck me as rather strange. So over the last few weeks, I have been doing a little bit of research with the various contacts I have in various countries, in flying schools, in language schools, etc., etc. And I have found some very interesting examples of language testing scenarios and approaches to language testing, which show that there is an enormous gulf between the standards applied between one authority and another authority, or one body and another body. So in this video I'm going to show you a little bit of the research that I've done. Obviously I'm not going to name any of the authorities or the bodies or the individuals concerned. These people obviously spoke to me in the strictest confidence. But I think it's an interesting topic for discussion, particularly for those of us working in language proficiency on a regular basis. And hopefully by sharing some of these examples, it can help us to become a little bit more standardized in the way that we approach these particular topics. Okay, so before we start, just a little bit of a refresher on how language proficiency is generally managed under the EASA system. So this is the ICAO rating scale, which is universal across all ICAO countries, which of course defines the 6 criteria that we use, which are of course holistic criteria, meaning that they are subject to the interpretation of the person or persons doing the assessment of the pilot in question. So these are essentially the language proficiency requirements in terms of the standard. Now, under EASA, which is essentially the European Union of Aviation, there is a regulatory text dealing with language proficiency for EASA or European license holders, which is covered by FCL 055, particularly paragraphs B and D, B being language proficiency full stop, and D being language proficiency specific to IFR flying. So EASA defines basically a framework in FCL 55 B and D, but it's left to the national authorities to decide in which way they want to apply these regulations to pilots holding licenses in their particular state. So generally, licensing authorities will satisfy these requirements in one of 3 ways. They will either conduct the test themselves, so they'll have their own assessors in-house, and people have to go to the authority, to their offices, and actually physically take a test at the authority itself. They can also approve individual assessors, so just, for example, quite often it's flight examiners or radio telephony examiners who are also approved to conduct language assessments. Or, and this is probably the most common way in which it's done in Europe these days, is they will approve testing companies, independent testing companies, to carry out testing under their approval. And quite often they're referred to either as LABs, language assessment bodies, LPOs, language proficiency organisations, or LTBs, language testing bodies. These are the 3 acronyms that are generally used. All 3 of them mean the same thing. Just depends from one country to another how they want to call them. So we'll move on to the next part. Now, these bodies will generally create a test in one of three ways. There'll be an ad hoc test, which is generally conducted by an individual examiner, which often takes place during a flight test, or it can be an informal assessment, basically a chat over a cup of tea, particularly if the person is a native English speaker. There can be binary tests, whereby there are a number of exercises and you must achieve X number of points on each exercise to get a certain IKO level. Or you'll get holistic tests, which are tests whereby the candidate is just made to speak as much as possible, and one or more assessors will listen to the person speaking and grade their performance based on the IKO holistic criteria. Now, one thing that's very specific to EASA is that there is now reciprocal recognition of language certificates, which means that a holder of a license from any EASA member state can take their test with a body approved by any other EASA test, any EASA authority, and they can then have that license, that level added to their license, as you can see in this little table here. So up until now, this all sounds relatively simple. You have EASA authorities, so all of the European countries as a part of EASA, decide on a country-by-country basis, under their own rules, how they want to test language proficiency. So in the old days, before the advent of COVID and before the advent of remote testing and people moving around a lot more, these European authorities would approve bodies to do tests, or they would organise their own tests. But these tests were generally only used in the country where they were created, and for the pilots who were generally the same nationality as the body or the authority where the test was being conducted. So this meant that in each EASA member state, there was a kind of an unwritten rule which was created, which kind of defined where the boundaries were for a level 4, a level 5, and a level 6. So it was a kind of, not an official stereotype, but there was generally among the bodies working in the same market, there would always be an idea of what a level 4 was supposed to sound like, what a level 5 was supposed to sound like, and what a level 6 was supposed to sound like. When COVID came along, and online or remote testing became a thing, a number of pilots in one member state were then suddenly able to go online on their computer with a laptop or a webcam or whatever and do a test with a body approved in another member state. Probably a member state where they've never actually been to, they don't know anything about the aviation arrangements in that particular member state, but obviously with the wonders of the internet and online testing, they were able to buy a test from one of these bodies and then take the certificate and then give it back to their own licensing authority in their own country and have their license updated on the basis of that certificate. And this is where the situation started to get interesting, because up until the advent of online testing in COVID, it was very rare for a licensed pilot in one European state to get their language proficiency tested in another member state. So we ended up in a situation where country A would be testing a pilot from country B and applying the standards or the kind of commonly accepted boundaries for language levels of their country to pilots from another country. And this is where it became more complicated because, as I found through my research, what constitutes a level 4, 5 and 6 in one country or within one body can vastly differ from what constitutes a level 4, 5 and 6 in another country. So here is my first practical case study. So one EASA member state has a test which basically consists of translating pre-written texts in the language of that country into English. And a native English speaker who spoke the language of this country as a second language, but did their pilot training in that particular country, wanted to get their English language proficiency. So they turned up for the test, and they did the test, but because the main source of language production was written in a language other than English, and their command of that other language was not sufficient to understand everything that was written in that language, they only achieved a level 4, because it was, as we discussed earlier, a binary style test whereby the candidate has to get a certain number of points on each section in order to achieve the level. So in this case they only got enough points to achieve a level 4. So the main issue with this example is that the style of test was completely unsuited to the person taking it, because as we spoke about before, until recently the authority organising that particular test would never have even imagined that somebody who didn't speak their language to the level of a native speaker would think about taking an English test in their country. Now, our second example is the case of a pilot in one EASA member state, we'll say Authority A, who took an online test with a body approved by Authority B. Now, for some unknown reason, Authority A took exception to the level given by the body approved by Authority B, and actually contacted Authority B to query the result. There was then a review process, and the candidate's level was downgraded from a level 6 to a level 4. And then a week later, the same pilot took the test with a body approved by Authority C and achieved a level 5. So in this particular case, we have a pilot who in the space of 1 month has taken 3 English proficiency tests and been graded at 3 different levels by assessors from 3 different EASA member states. And I think this probably illustrates the best out of all the examples that massive gulf there is between assessment procedures and interpretation of the ITKO criteria from one country to another. And we're going to come on to some of the reasons behind that a little bit later on. Now, the last example I wanted to show you was the case of a pilot who took what we've termed a binary style test and achieved a level 5, so valid for 6 years, and then 6 years later came back and took a test with another EASA approved body and achieved a level 3 on a test which was done in a more of a holistic style. So in this particular test, we can probably say it's an example of what's been termed in linguistic circles as negative washback, whereby the candidate for a test is just concerned with performing well on that particular test, and will do a series of cramming exercises, generally with a company specialised in those kind of exercises, who may or may not have links with the body providing the test in question, and attends the test and scores very well on that particular test with that particular content, but as soon as they have to actually communicate spontaneously, they are completely lost, as we can see with the result when the person took a test with a more holistic based system. So why is there such a huge gulf between some of the levels given to the same pilot by multiple language testing bodies? Well, I think the first thing you have to look at is the way in which assessors who are conducting the tests and evaluating the people who are taking the tests are trained. Now, given the vast differences in levels given out in different EASA countries, it's hardly surprising that the way in which assessors are trained in different bodies is just as different and variable. So I'll give an example. One of the major bodies providing online testing at the moment, in one which is approved by one EASA member state and has existed for several years, their assessor training consists of, here's the IKO grid, read it, you do 2 observed tests, 2 supervised tests, and that's your lot. You're released to start conducting tests. Another major provider of online testing requires that their assessors follow 40 hours of initial training, that they observe no fewer than 10 tests, and that they conduct no fewer than 5 tests under supervision. Now, in those 40 hours of training, a number of real examples are used of listening to sample tests, and there's a real in-depth analysis of how the ICAO criteria are supposed to be applied. So that's probably one of the major reasons why we can have such a massive difference between one body and another body. Another example of a reason why there may be inconsistency in the levels given out between EASA member states and testing bodies is simply because of external commercial pressures. One pilot I spoke to told me that he took a test with a body and achieved a level 4. And at the end of the test, the person doing the test told him, in these words, obviously translated from another language, your level is clearly worth a level 5, but we're only going to give you a level 4 because you don't need it for your job and because we want to make sure that our revenue stream continues with training 4 years down the line. However little or however much training you decide to do with your assessors or your raters or whatever you want to call them, the ICAO criteria are still holistic criteria. So let's take, for example, the question of pronunciation. So for a level 6, pronunciation is supposed to only rarely interfere, or almost never interfere, with ease of understanding. Whereas for a level 5, it's supposed to be rarely interfere with ease of understanding. Now, who decides what is rarely and almost never? Who are we talking about? Are we talking about a Spanish air traffic controller listening to a German pilot? Or are we talking about a UK air traffic controller listening to a French pilot? And again, for the question of structure. For a level 5, in order to get a level 5, your basic structures have to be consistently well controlled. So what does consistently mean? Does it mean half of the time, more than half of the time, 3/4 of the time? So how do you approach these holistic criteria in a way which provides a standardized result across different countries, different cultures, and different stereotypes relating to what a certain level is supposed to sound like? Now, in terms of rater training, from one country to another, as I said, the training differs vastly. Not only does it differ vastly, but different rater training organizations will apply their own interpretation of the criteria. So, for example, in a number of EASA member states, assessors are required to undergo rater training brought in from a third-party operator. Most of them are based in the UK. I think there's 2 or 3 companies that provide rater training in the UK. And each rater who's done the training with a particular rater training body will apply the criteria in the way that they've been instructed to do so by their rater training organisation. But does that mean that they are right and the bodies who train their assessors in-house are wrong? It's impossible to say, because you cannot apply a binary assessment to holistic criteria. There is always an element of subjectivity, however much you try to standardise your assessors. So how do we get round this issue? And this is becoming a much more important issue because in quite a unique way to Europe, this ability to take your English test in any other member state, which is essentially a foreign country to the one in which you live, means that, as we've seen, there can be enormous differences in the way that pilots are graded. If it was up to me, I think we ought probably to introduce a Europe-wide standardised English language for aviation assessor certificate, whereby everybody conducting English language assessments for EASA licence holders must pass a course and must show that they are assessing to the same standard as anybody else. And that way the market should become much more regulated, and there will not be so much, shall we call it, ELP tourism between member states. So anyway, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video, which is a little bit longer than the ones that I normally make, but it's been one I've been thinking about making for quite a long time, because I have observed some really weird and wonderful things in the English language testing market in the last couple of years, and I really felt it was important to share these with the wider aviation English community, just to see what everybody thinks. And once again, I'm not here to point the finger at anybody. I'm not here to say that one body is better than another body, or that we must assess English in a certain way. What I'm trying to do is get a feel for how we can have a slightly more standardized solution across the whole of the European market. In any case, please feel free to contact me. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and various other internet platforms, or just drop me an email, and I'll be very happy to discuss this with anybody who's interested in talking a bit more about it. In any case, I hope you all enjoy your weekend, and I look forward to speaking to you all again very soon. Bye-bye.